Kim Kelly, labor journalist, author of the book Fight Like Hell, The Untold History of American Labor. But today we're talking about her piece in the magazine In These Times called The Young Miners Dying of an Old Man's Disease. That part's in quotes. Kim, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me and for giving me the space to talk about this crisis.
It really is a crisis. That's how we titled it in the show today. And I'm blown away by your piece. Everyone should really check it out. It's incredible journalism, and we will link to it obviously. But I was just shocked that to see just how astronomical the rates of increase in black lung for coal miners in particularly Kentucky and West Virginia, how rapidly that has increased, both in terms of the number of miners that are experiencing the effects of black lung, and also just how quickly they're being diagnosed with it, given to relative to how long they've worked in the mines. So just introduce our audience to what's happening really to these miners in the states that you covered, Kentucky and West Virginia.
Sure. So this is it's a heartbreaking situation, and it's something that is not news to folks in those areas, right? In these coal communities, specifically in Central Appalachia. Like, they know this is going on, but outside of that world, the last like the most recent time most people have heard about black lung is like Zoolander, right? Like, it's
Right.
something that we think of in black and white. But unfortunately, over the past 10, 15 years, even longer, really, but that specific time frame, this disease, which is it's a colloquial term for coal workers' pneumoconiosis, which is just a horrible, incurable, progressive disease that attacks the lungs and eventually chokes you to death, as one miner described it to me. It's something that's been around for a long time, but the rates really went down after the passage of the 1977 Mine Safety Act, because there are regulations put in place, there's safety measures, there was all these different programs and infrastructure put in place to protect miners from inhaling as much of that dangerous coal dust. But now, fast forward a few years, a few dozen years, we're at a point where, those storied Central Appalachian coal seams, the ones that, generations of robber barons used to extract blood, sweat, coal, and money out of those Appalachian populations, those seams are getting thinner. And so now the miners have to dig through much more rock, sandstone, which is laden with quartz and with silica. And silica is the problem here. I spoke to a number of medical experts who have been studying this. Who are like, yeah, no, that's the number one issue. Like, there are a couple contributing factors to this crisis, but number one is the silica, because silica is 20 times more toxic than coal dust. It just tears you up. It causes so much more damage, so much more quickly. And so we're seeing a resurgence of black lung in its most progressive forms among people who have only spent 10, 15, 20 years in the mines. And sure, that sounds like a very long time. Like, that's a full career for most people. But when you take into account that some of these folks, in all genders, but mostly men, some of these men, they started going down the mines when they left high school. 20 years takes you to about my age. Like, there's men, I'm 35, there's men my age, a little younger, a little older, who are now struggling with this age-old curse. And it's just wrenching to see. Like, in this investigation I did for In These Times, I spoke to a number of different miners, but I've profiled a man named John Moore, who is just this wonderful, hardworking family man. He's 42 years old. He started working in the mines 10 years ago because he wanted to make more money for his family. Very standard situation in Central Appalachia in West Virginia, where he's from. And now he's 42 years old, and he has 3 young children, and he has the most advanced form of black lung, of just this chronic pulmonary disease. He's also at high risk for heart failure. He's in really bad shape, and he's 42, and he's not alone. And so I really wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to have the support from In These Times and the platform to help tell this story and help get this out there, because it's just something that we can't afford to forget. Like, these folks cannot afford to be forgotten, because that's something that has happened to coal country and the people that live and work there for a real long time. But this is, I think it's kind of grim and almost splashy enough that it's been getting a little bit of attention since I put this story out. And that's a good thing, because we need a really big response to this. We can't just let this fester, because already too many young lives have been lost because coal bosses would rather make money than follow regulations, and Republican politicians would rather cut regulations than actually help the coal miners they like to drag out for photo ops.
Yeah, and I want to get to that, the regulatory aspect in a second. But I just wanted to expand on just the sheer numbers of this. I wrote this down from your piece that black lung affects more than 1 in 8 coal miners in Kentucky and West Virginia who have been working in the mines for 20 to 24 years. That is up from 1 in 30 a decade ago for that same like time frame and rate. And that is because of what you describe here, silica, which is this, the dust that now they're breaking into as they go deeper and deeper to find coal when they're mining. If you don't mind just explaining how we got to this point where, like politicians have been talking about clean coal for so many years and how we're trying to phase this industry out, and yet there's still these mining efforts that are incredibly dangerous in order to keep, honestly, the industry afloat for some bosses.
So the thing about, and I've been thinking about this too in some of the reactions, because when I tweeted my piece out, and Twitter being Twitter, not all the reactions are great, and some of them said, "Oh, we'll just shut down the coal mines, problem solved." I was like, okay, well, that sounds really simple when you put it like that, and
Right.
don't think about the fact that people have families to support and lives to make it through. But one little piece of that, and of course I'm not like a pro coal person at all, obviously it's killing my friends, but one thing that I think is important to recognize about this specific part of the conversation is that a lot of the coal being mined is metallurgical coal, which is used to make coke, which is used to make steel. They're not keeping the lights on, they're mining materials that are used for industrialization and for construction projects and basically to build the cleaner infrastructure we need. So it's not as simple as flipping a switch and like, okay, we're done, everyone's fine now. And really one of the things that, and in terms of regulations and how we got here, we've known that silica is a problem since the 70s. Like that, this isn't a surprise. There is much more stringent regulation for construction workers, for just like the general silica like regulation, like allowable amount of respirable silica that the
Right.
federal government has, like that. They have a silica standard, but coal mines are exempt. They don't have their own standards. So right now they're operating under a standard that allows them to breathe in double what's allowable for any other type of worker in this country. And the conditions in those coal mines, I spoke to so many miners and safety experts about, well, why? Like, we know this is a problem. Mine bosses know this is a problem. Why wouldn't they want to keep their workforce healthy and not have to basically have guys dropping like flies? And it comes down to the fact that it takes more time to enact the proper safety regulations, to hang curtain, to make sure the ventilation plans are up to date, just to follow the rules, to follow the existing rules and existing protections that are afforded to miners that people know work. It takes a little bit more time, and that time takes away from profit. Every minute you spent working on safety measures and making sure you and the other guys are okay, that's a moment that you're not mining coal. And guess what the mine bosses care the most about? They can
Right.
always find another coal miner, you know? And it's so much of it comes down to greed. Like, none of this is a secret, especially in places like West Virginia. The coal bosses know that they could prevent this. That's something that was hammered home by so many people I spoke to, including like the acting official at MSHA, the Mine Safety and Health Administration, Chris Williamson. Like, he's like, this is preventable if they follow the rules, if the proper precautions are followed. Like, nobody needs to get black lung. Like, no one, this doesn't need to be happening, but it is, because some people care more about money than they do about human lives.
And now we can, touch more on that regulatory aspect. You write about how the MSHA, I'm forgetting, or the Mine Safety and Health Administration, yeah, MSHA, they are known for kind of going easy on the industry in this way when they cut corners or they don't follow the guardrails that are already threadbare as is. Can you talk about that dynamic a bit, Kim?
Yeah, I have some sympathy for MSHA now, especially because they have Assistant Secretary Williamson at the helm. I believe that he cares, and he told me, I've interviewed him multiple times on and off record about how like this is his priority. He's from West Virginia. His granddad was a coal miner. He actually cares. But Chris Williamson hasn't been in charge of MSHA the whole time, right? Like this is it is something that I learned while I was reporting this and speaking to folks that have been following this longer than I have. And obviously, like, shout out to the folks who've been covering this longer than me, because there is a lot of great reporting on this issue. I'm just kind of working from where we are now with the latest data. But something that is just so frustrating and so obvious, too, is the fact that it all depends on who is in office, who's in charge. Because we, even as early as the Obama administration, MSHA was working on a new silica standard. That was a rule they were trying to advance. They were trying to do something about this. And essentially, the way it was described to me was that they ran out of time because then he was out of office and then Trump came in. And this is a tidbit that it's just so indicative of how little Republicans actually care about the people they use as avatars of good Americans. When Trump got in, he got to appoint his MSHA assistant secretary, the guy to run MSHA, the agency, and he picked a former coal executive who spent his tenure there not advancing the silica rule, not looking into ways to increase miner safety, but looking into how to make regulations less burdensome
There we go.
for the mine bosses.
Yeah.
Like he spent 4 years that could have been used to address this issue, that could have been used to save people, trying to figure out how to cut more regulations so his coal boss buddies could make more money. And think of how many times that must have happened since the 70s, how many administrations we've had, some that pretend to care about coal miners and don't do anything, some that don't even bother to care about them. Like this is such a specific issue that it wouldn't take that much effort to do something about it. You just need the political will and a little bit of elbow grease, right? Like MSHA has been, I think like a lot of smaller federal agencies, it has a big remit and a small budget. They're understaffed. Like they could be doing so much more already, but they need more staff. They need more funding if they want to be out there conducting all the necessary mine inspections and actually levying real fines, or like hell, throwing coal bosses in jail. They need the budget and they need the teeth, right? Like,
well, this is why, I mean, like, this is a great example for people that say there's no difference between Democrats and Republicans, and we're progressive on the show, right? But like, and we hit Biden from the left, but this is an example. The administrative state, these smaller agencies that don't get a ton of recognition or spotlight, are immensely important to keeping people safe. As are unions,